Hello and welcome to the podcast that can't stand these rousing videos on the big screen, paper clappers and light shows, and is more interested in a gravy-based drink and a pie. It's the big man up top.
It's the big man up top indeed. I'm Joe.
And I'm Ed. How you doing, Joe?
Yeah, I'm good, Ed. I can't say I've ever had a gravy-based drink at a football game.
Have you not?
I'm not a Bovril man.
Oh, you're missing out.
Yeah, do you regularly drink Bovril?
Well, I don't regularly. It's more of an occasional thing. If it takes my fancy.
Outside of a football game?
Never. I've never had a Bovril in my life outside of a football game.
I don't think it's ever been sold outside of a football game.
No, just on stadium concourses. But speaking of light shows, we're actually going to a football game this week, aren't we, Joe?
We are, Ed, tonight.
Yes, tonight I am taking you to go and see the mighty Potters.
You know what?
In action at home to Bristol City, and he can't wait.
I feel cold already at the thought of tonight's game. It's going to be so cold.
You've brought your thermals.
I have, yeah. You've taken me to one before. Last year you took me to Stoke against Leeds, which promised to be an entertaining game. Leeds had just come down from the Premier League and they still had quite a lot of their good players, so I thought, this actually might be quite a good game.
And it wasn't, was it?
It finished 1-0 to Stoke through an own goal.
I'm sure it'll be a better game than that, won't it?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, good. Maybe we should do sort of an emergency pod at the game.
Yeah, we could do like a reaction to Stoke against Bristol City.
Us walking away after Stoke have lost 2-0.
I'm sure that's what the people want.
Should we start with some correspondence, Joe?
Yeah, we've had quite the influx, Ed, following something that happened last week.
Yes.
Do you want to talk us through?
Yes. So in the quiz last week, I momentarily forgot that there was a book of the Bible called Peter.
Well, there's two of them, isn't there?
There's two of them,
yeah.
And it was, I read the Bible. I'm not on here to display my Bible reading prowess, but
Sure.
I read it. Okay, I'm very aware of the books of First and Second Peter, but in the moment I forgot. And let me tell you, people are not letting me live it down. Put
Rightly
it this way.
so.
So you'll remember former guest Morgan, who we had on a few weeks ago. He sent me a message saying, really enjoying this book. Have you heard of it? And then sent me a screenshot of the first few lines of First Peter. I thought that was
it's good stuff.
Mildly amusing. We had a message from Sarah who just said, Ed, not just one, there is two whole books called Peter.
Two of them.
And I even had a message from Graham who actually said, will you get sacked from UCB for that?
Sacked in the morning.
They're clamouring. They're clamouring for my job.
It's been a bad start to the season and they're already clamouring for you to
I
be
know,
sacked.
and you know what? Look, I can't argue with that.
You know what? My favourite thing about the whole thing is when I suggested Peter Crouch, the smugness on your face as you said, I'd love you to show me the book of Peter.
Yes.
Just to be shut down by not just me,
but producer Anthony, who kept that whole bit in.
He did. And I actually asked his opinion on the quiz last week, wanting some support on, because I thought it was quite a difficult question, and he said he felt that I needed to be brought down a peg or two.
Yes, good. Yes, well done. Yes, we love that.
Well, let's see what happens today. We've also had some correspondence from Mark. He got in touch with an email. The email subject said, two big men up top.
Ooh.
And this was accompanied by a screenshot from the BBC Sport website, commentary on the Luton-Watford game, and it said, I'm glad they've played the two big men up top today. Morris and Adebayo have won everything up front. And Mark says, thought you'd appreciate and agree with this insight from Leon Barnett. Every team and every podcast needs not one, but two big men up top.
Two big men up top. Is that us? Are we the two big men up top?
I'd say so. It's not something you see often, is it? Two big men.
No, it's not. But look, we're all for it.
Yeah, let's do it.
I mean, I can't ever see a situation where there'd be three, but two definitely feels maybe like overkill. But look, we're here for it. Thanks for your email, Mark. And you can get in touch with the show at podcasts@ucb.co.uk.
Okay, Ed, we're going to go straight into the trivia question this week.
I'm really nervous because you are going to make this unnecessarily hard for me.
You know what? I've cycled through a few options in my mind on how to make... And I don't think this is super hard.
Okay.
I think we need to keep it competitive.
We do. And just for the listeners, Joe is currently 4-2 up.
4-2 up. So what's going to happen is I'm going to ask Ed a guess the player question with a difference, where the player will share his first name with a book in the Bible. Now, Ed, do you know all the books in the Bible?
I thought I did, but apparently not.
Well, let's see how you do this week. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. Which Premier League player, that's a Premier League player,
Okay.
has received the most yellow cards so far this season?
Oh,
Which Premier League player has received the most yellow cards so far this season?
Premier League player, most yellow cards. Goodness me, that's an interesting one. I'm instantly thinking it's got to be a central midfielder or a centre back.
Interesting.
That's my feelings.
Some professional fouls, you're thinking?
Yeah. I feel like from watching Match of the Day at the weekend, there was something about a player who was on a certain amount of bookings already, and it being quite a lot. So somebody's about to get a match ban for getting 5 bookings, but I can't for the life of me. I'm trying to picture who that player was. So you'll have to come back to me later.
I'll come back to you later on and see how you're getting on.
Wonderful. So did you catch much of the football at the weekend, Joe?
I did, actually, Ed. I actually had the weekend to myself. My wife was away in London, so I thought, obviously I'll miss her very much. But amazing. Saturday night, I thought, I'm going to get a takeaway. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do a face mask.
Right.
So I got myself a... Is
this real?
This is real.
Okay.
I watched Match of the Day and had a cup of tea, takeaway, and an avocado clay face mask.
Oh my gosh, I don't think that's very big man up top, is it?
Not at all. I'm really sorry about that. But sometimes you got to look after yourself.
Well, yeah, look, we're all about well-being and all that stuff here.
Thanks for letting me share that, Ed.
Let's start with Bournemouth 2, Arsenal 0, which felt like, I suppose it felt like the big news with Arsenal dropping points and having a bit of a tough time of it. Obviously, Saliba getting sent off was the big story quite early on, and that really sort of scuppered them for the rest of the game. What are your thoughts on the sending off, first of all?
My initial thought was, that's harsh.
Yeah.
He's so far out. But he was through on goal. There's been a lot of chat of, Ben White would have caught him. He's a fast player. Yeah. But I don't think that can be taken into consideration with this.
He was so far away. And I think, if I remember rightly, the way... Because the striker was in an offside position, wasn't he? But it was a ball knocked back by the Arsenal player.
Yeah. It was a quite bizarre back pass from Trossard.
Yes, that was it. And I think, like, to be fair, if you as a defender are happy being out of position and keeping the striker behind you, he's fine, he's in an offside position, you run the risk of an errant back pass resulting in exactly that situation. And it was clumsy more than anything. But you're absolutely right. If he doesn't do that, he is likely through on goal with a 1-on-1 chance. So I think he's got to go, really.
I think it's fair. I think this has been Arsenal's season so far. You know, they haven't dropped a point when they've finished a match with 11 players. The only time they've lost or drawn is when they've had a man sent off, which you could say that's kind of an excuse for losing. But all 3 sending offs they've had have all been very avoidable.
And also, you could argue that playing that game 1-0 down with 11 men would have been a better situation for them to be in than play the whole of that game with 10. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Howard Webb texting.
Oh, excellent.
And obviously, he's clearly not texting send him off. But it just had that whole look of it, and it was great. I loved all the chat. I just think
you're Howard Webb. There's a big VAR thing going on right now.
Put your phone away.
Don't go on your phone. You know the camera's going straight on you. Why are you on your phone, Howard?
Yeah. So moving on, we chatted about comebacks just the other week.
Yes.
But a really great comeback was Leicester coming back to win 3-2 away at Southampton. And I absolutely loved the impact that Abdul Fatawu had on the game when he came on. He reminds me of a bit of a throwback of a winger. He gets the ball and he takes on his man and he runs directly, and that's what we need.
That's what we want. None of this cutting back.
None of this, foot on the ball, recycle possession, get the ball and just run.
We don't want to recycle possession. We want to run at them.
And another great goal for my friend Facundo Buonanotte.
You love him, don't you?
I love him just because of his interesting sounding name. But great run forward, dart forward to get on the end of a cross, and fantastic. You just love to see it. You love to see a great comeback.
You do, and there was another little throwback in this game, and something that I love to see. Jamie Vardy absolutely lashed a penalty.
Just smashing it down the middle.
No stuttering run-ups.
Well, it wasn't down the middle, was it? Was it down the middle?
No, it was slightly off to the side.
No.
But none of this stuttering run-up nonsense.
Exactly.
And Mo Salah did the same. I really like this. All they do is they know where they're putting it, and they absolutely lash it home. You then go to the Fulham game, Andreas Pereira does one of these stuttering run-ups, trying to psych out the keeper, and it gets saved. It's a win for football, Ed.
It's a win for football, yeah. And I think, Leicester have obviously had a bit of a sluggish start to the season, but I think any team that can do that will be fine. They've got the sort of the character and the mental fortitude, if you were, to overcome a 2-0 deficit away from home. So I think they'll be fine. Southampton struggling still?
Yeah, just 1 point, and no real signs of scraping out wins.
No.
Losing a 2-0 lead is unforgivable. I see them struggling quite hard.
Let's go to Old Trafford.
Let's do it.
Where Man United looked oddly quite good.
They looked all right, didn't they? Looked like a team, particularly in the second half.
Their front three looked really good, beating Brentford 2-1. I'd like us to touch briefly on the Brentford goal. Now, in the end, it was a little bit inconsequential because United won anyway, but there was a bit of controversy around in that De Ligt had a head injury, and was bleeding from his head, and on a few occasions they tried to get him off to clear it up and to patch him up, but he still kept bleeding, and every time the ref spotted it, they were dragging him back off again to clean it up and patch it up again. And I think it was maybe the third time that he was off the pitch, Brentford scored their goal in exactly the situation where De Ligt would have been in position to clear the ball from a corner. And so obviously United, particularly De Ligt, reacted really quite angrily about being forced to have him off the pitch.
I kind of see both sides to this. Head injuries are such a big topic of conversation over the last few years.
And you can't take any chances.
You can't. You see someone bleeding from the head, you need to take them off. You need to make sure they're okay. But I think at the same time, there has to be an element of common sense here from the referee's standpoint. United have a defensive corner. You're then ordering their tallest centre-back to leave the pitch. And you can see why there's anger there.
Yeah.
But where do you stand on Ten Hag at the moment?
I'm not sure. I thought with all the clamour, I thought he would have gone by now, and he hasn't. So I think, look, he shows signs of the team really starting to gel, and then it's just about consistency. It's them getting them to play that way consistently. We'll see how it pans out over the coming weeks. Moving on to the other Manchester club, Man City on Sunday were away at Wolves.
They were.
And they also won 2-1 with a very late goal.
Very late.
The latest of late goals.
10 seconds to go.
10 seconds to go, and it was controversial because of the positioning of Bernardo. Do you want to just run through that goal, Joe?
Yeah, so Manchester City, in the last minute, had their 18th corner of the game. Bernardo Silva is on the goalkeeper, Jose Sarr, and he's interfering a little bit. I don't think he's fouling him in that point. The ball comes in, Bernardo runs away from the goalkeeper, and John Stones heads it in. Which,
look, is fair enough. And I think, for me, we had a rather feisty Sarah Hine in the office. Wasn't happy when I claimed that City got lucky by being allowed this goal. I think what I would say is that by the letter of the law, it was correct as it stands. I do agree that Bernardo wasn't interfering with the goalkeeper. By the time the header comes in, he's away from the goalkeeper. What I would say is, for me, in the build-up, the stuff that Bernardo is doing, the standing, for me, that's obstruction. He wants to have a run and jump and catch the ball as it comes in, and he can't because of the position of Bernardo. But it's not even just like he's standing there. He is actively moving to be in his way to block him. And I think that's obstruction. I think that shouldn't be allowed. Maybe by the letter of the law, it's fine.
But I think that's part of the game now. You see every team do this.
It is.
And in that situation, it's just a big part of the game where you will have a player that interferes with the goalkeeper. They won't foul them. They'll just be a bit of a nuisance around them.
Well, and I think that's my point, is I don't think it is a foul by the letter of the law. I think it should be.
Well, why don't you send Howard Webb a text?
I'll send Howard Webb a text. Moving on to the game that I'm sure you were most interested in. Liverpool 2, Chelsea 1. It was a weekend for 2-1s, wasn't it? Now, there wasn't a lot of chat about this game. I thought generally Liverpool looked comfortable without being outstanding. I thought Chelsea were a bit... The big thing for me was Palmer. I thought that Palmer was just largely absent. Really.
Ineffective, yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I wrote when I was making my notes about this game, secondary celebrations. I hate them. Jackson's goal in the first half, the flag went up for offside, didn't it? And the on-field decision was offside. The VAR had a look, determined he was onside. There wasn't really a celebration at the time.
No.
So the players have all just sort of stood around waiting for it to go on the screen, and then it says goal awarded, and then the players run around, run to the away end. That's what I don't like. No,
it's not right, is it?
No. For me, if that's how you score a goal, it should just be a quiet little fist pump.
Just a little fist bump.
Get in, okay.
Not all run to the away fans.
You can't engineer that atmosphere,
right,
So
you saw a similar thing in City Wolves, though, didn't you? You saw City celebrate a goal, Wolves then celebrate the goal being disallowed offside. Then City celebrating again, a third celebration.
Yeah, look
with the VAR. Let's just have one.
Let's have one. Yeah, you're allowed one celebration. Yeah, no good. But Liverpool doing okay. How are you feeling about Liverpool at the moment?
Well, what I would say about Arne Slot, he's worked wonders with my blood pressure and my stress levels. Under Klopp, it was so chaotic. It was called heavy metal football. You'd go all in, and it was great to watch. But it was stressful.
You don't need that in your life, do you?
You don't. You just want to be sat back with your avocado face mask on, just chilling, don't you?
What was your takeaway?
Pizza.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I thought you were going to say, you had Japanese or something.
Oh, Japanese.
Yeah.
No.
Some sushi. We're going to finish with Tottenham 4, West Ham 1. A bit of a stuttering start for Spurs, but they really came out strong in the second half. Ange showed his tactical prowess, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that sub changed the game completely. I can't remember that many times seeing him make a sub that's changed the game like that. It was good to see. Obviously, Spurs bouncing back from quite a calamitous comeback against Brighton 2 weeks ago. I think the international break came at a good time for them, and they look good.
I think it's interesting that we finish on Tottenham and West Ham, because I think Ange and Lopetegui are sort of highlighting a discussion that we want to have today.
Yeah.
In talking about the sort of relationships with the media. I feel like Ange has been a bit of a darling to the media. He's courted them, hasn't he? And the journalists all love him. Bit of a different story for Lopetegui. Obviously, the discussions about how long he's got at West Ham. But you had a chat with Rob Westall, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I thought it would be interesting to sit down with Rob. So he does some work with us here at UCB. But before this, he was a sports journalist with the BBC. And I thought it would be interesting to have a chat with him about what it's like being part of the football media around conversations with managers. What are the protocols? Like, how do you do this? How do you kind of get your work done? Rob, thanks so much for joining us on The Big Man Up Top. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well indeed. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So you present on UCB One. You are the Saturday Breakfast Show presenter, and you are a news journalist as well.
Yeah, well, I started off in newspapers in South Wales, and then I got a job at the BBC and worked in radio, and then did a bit of marketing, and then I was full-time in the ministry after that then.
So working for the BBC, I think our listeners would be fascinated to hear a bit about what that was like. What did the day-to-day look like as a BBC journalist?
So I started off in news, so I would cover politics, and I researched on their two really big news programmes, Good Morning Wales and Good Evening Wales. And then I went on the bulletins desk, so I was doing the news, and the head of sport liked my voice. I got recommended to him. So they said, would you like to look at potentially doing some commentary? So I started down that role. I'd go and watch Newport County quite a lot, and I'd basically go alongside the existing commentator, and I'd record dummy commentary, learn the ropes off them, speak to some players I used to idolise growing up, which was quite cool. They were the pundits. That was awesome, seeing the behind the scenes of that. And then they unleashed me for my first match, and it was my big break. So I was going to be the commentator for that game, and it got called off. I never got the chance to do that again. So then I was covering the Welsh clubs in the Premier League along with some colleagues, and we'd go to matches, we'd write live match reports, interview the managers in the week leading up and obviously afterwards and things like that. And some of your listeners will be familiar with the live on a Saturday. They've got a live sort of page where they've got people such as myself at the ground commenting on stuff that you wouldn't really see or recognize, sort of giving you a bit of flavor of what it's like to be there. But it was cool because you get to sit by pundits of Five Live and people like that. So Steve Claridge, I sat by him once. I didn't have a clue what formation Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was playing for Cardiff City at the time. I don't think anybody did during his tenure, to be honest. And I said, Steve, what are they actually doing? So he gave me this fantastic expose of the formation, which made it onto the BBC Live page that day. Brilliant. But that was just as interesting as watching the action on the pitch. Was you'd see legends of the games. Trevor Francis was in the ones, and I was just in awe. And there were some co-commentators on BBC Wales, players I'd watched when I was a youngster, who then I'd listened to because they covered my team. Former Welsh and Crystal Palace striker Ian Walsh. He was a bit of a legend, but he was so nice, and he was everything you'd hoped that he would be, because sometimes when you meet your heroes, it doesn't always go to plan.
Yeah, we were speaking a couple of weeks ago about that whole balance between, obviously these are your heroes, but you are there in a professional capacity. How do you balance that of, oh, I really respect you as a person, but I'm also here for work?
Well, I mean, to be fair, everyone's very professional. However, I would say the pre-match press conferences, a manager is not a comedian. It's not a professional comedian at all. Some of them aren't even funny. But if they make a joke, no matter how rubbish it is, everybody laughs like it's the funniest thing that they've heard. So I lived in Swansea, right? So I'm a Cardiff fan, living in Swansea, covering all the Welsh clubs. It was my first press conference at Swansea. And I knew the press officer. I said, oh, can you give me a scoop? Have you got anything? He used to work for the newspaper I used to work for. And he said, oh, Ashley Williams, the captain of Wales, has just signed a new deal. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. That's awesome. So I had that up my sleeve. And because you're BBC, you get the first set of questions to ask. And the manager at the time's Gary Monk, who, as a Cardiff fan, man, he was the enemy, you know. But I had a really faulty mic, was it? So it was a microphone, and basically you could record on it. It was a brilliant bit of gear, but I had a faulty one. And somebody said, oh, you want to watch that one? Because when you move it too much, it gives a scratchy sound. And obviously, if that audio is corrupted, it's going to be unusable. So I took 2 other devices with me. I had a BBC-approved app on the one phone. I had my earphones in, and you know, it was fairly funny, I suppose. And he goes, oh, what's he doing? Recording on an iPod? He's listening to music. He's not even listening to me. And everyone laughed. And it was funny, but it wasn't that funny. So everyone laughed really loudly. And I went, yeah, Gary, so Captain of Wales has just signed a new contract. Do you want to comment on that? And the look on his face just fell. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, obviously, it's great boon for the club. And
it's a mic drop moment for you right there.
So I suppose that was professional, but kind of unprofessional, because it was sort of, I was like, right, have this then, Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite a competitive environment then. You get that first question, but you're aiming for the scoop, right? How did you find that competitive element within the press conference room?
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, you've got some real characters, as in any walk of life, but it's also a tough job. So it's not as glamorous as it sounds. So, for instance, on a weekend, your social life goes out the window. You're working really late. So it's not just the match. You're leading up to the match. Then there's all the fallout of the match. And if anything happens at the match, you were there till, could be all weekend you work in when you didn't plan to be. So a lot of people share that sort of experience. It's not sort of like a cutthroat thing. It wasn't, in my experience, a cutthroat thing anyway. I did get a scoop once. A colleague gave me a scoop and I got to interview a manager, and that went pear-shaped big time. They'd tip me off that the player of the match hadn't slept for 48 hours. This is a Premier League match. I can't say names, but he'd had a brilliant game. His wife had a baby, and the correspondent couldn't do the interview that we would normally do after the game because basically he had to do a show and they'd brought the scheduling forward. So I thought, this is my big break. Awesome. And I've got this scoop. And he gave me that. It was fantastic. And I was biding my time for this question, said the question, and the manager completely changed towards me. And I had a reputation for banning people from clubs. And I saw my career flash before my eyes. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna ban me from the club here. So I just said, look, I'm really, really sorry. I said that about 3 times. And then he changed. He said, ask me another question, son. So I did. And when I told everybody in the office, they were like, no way. That is unbelievable. That never happens. He bans everyone. It was a real talking point for a day or two afterwards. So whilst it was a competitive environment, I think the competitive edge came from wanting to be professional, wanting to be really good at your job and being respected by your colleagues more than trying to get one up on anyone, really.
That's a great story. I could talk to you all day about football, get all your stories and all the stats that you store in your brain, but we're going to have to call it a day there. Thanks so much for joining us on The Big Man Up Top.
My pleasure.
Amazing chat with Rob Westall there, who just had some great stories.
He did. I spoke with him for so long, and he had so many stories about his time as a journalist. I'd love to get him on again just to hear some more stories. But he spoke a lot as well about competitiveness within the game of sports journalism, wanting to get that scoop and that story. And I think it brings up some interesting conversations about how you do that respectfully, particularly as someone with a faith, like how he was in that circle.
I had the privilege last year to meet a very esteemed sports journalist, a guy called Brian Glanville. He was one of the main journalists around in the 70s in football. And he was sharing about how the relationship was that you were like a trusted friend if you were a journalist. And he was one of the journalists that was allowed with the England team in 1970. He would stay at the same hotel. He would have dinner with them. He was very much a sort of a trusted friend. The manager would give him news ahead of time. So he'd say, I'm going to tell you this, but you can't release it to the public until ... because I need to speak to, this player. But I'm going to give you the scoop so that you can send it back to your editors or whatever it was. And I loved that. It was a very mutual, respectful relationship. Whereas now, I wonder if maybe, and I don't know, I blame the 90s and the tabloids culture.
I think that's it. I think you're right. I think journalists have so much more exposure now than they did back then. And it's all about clickbait. It's all about getting your article clicked on and read. And they will go to extreme measures to twist words, to twist stories. And this is something actually that Ten Hag's been speaking about this weekend, which is partly why we wanted to do this chat. Is that he did an interview before the weekend's games, and that the media are spinning stories, are creating these narratives of kind of fake stories coming from the club. And I think it's made me realise how much influence these people actually have, and it's a tricky ground to tread, isn't it? Yeah,
I think so. And Ten Hag's a really great example, because for weeks, in fact, let's be honest, months and years, Ten Hag seems to be constantly under pressure. But the question I would ask is, who says that? I think it is the media that go, oh, well, a manager's under pressure now. And everyone then reads these articles and goes, is he? Right, well, he is. Yeah. Okay, so then in their mind, he is under pressure. I remember at Stoke when we had Nathan Jones as the manager for a long while. And he was actually in the job a lot longer than people thought he would be, because Stoke didn't win for a long time with him in charge. But all of the fans and the local journalists that were there could see Stoke were actually playing really good football, and we were really unlucky a lot of the time. And there was just a sense of, it's okay, it'll come good. And he got way longer than I think other managers would have. But I think that was because you had the journalists there seeing it and making the decision to say, right, at this point, he's now under pressure. And then at that point, he is. And that's when the rumours start coming around. And that's when the clamour happens and clubs get strong-armed into then making decisions and all that sort of stuff. So you're right. I think they are very influential. Yeah, and I think there's a responsibility on both sides, to be honest. On the journalist side, there's a responsibility to make sure what you're reporting is true and respectful. But there's also a responsibility on us as people who consume this content. Let's be aware of what we're reading, where it's come from. Yeah. Is this true? I'm sure we're all guilty of it. You read something on Twitter, you paste it into your group chat as if it's official news. You're like, look at this. Let's be checking what we're
what we're sharing, what
it's
we're
the
reading.
opinion piece of one journalist. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And there are some journalists whose opinion almost matters more, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
Who are your go-tos, Joe?
Well, the big one is Fabrizio Romano. Isn't
He's
it?
the one.
He's the transfer guy. And actually, like, hearing interviews with him, football clubs will use him and players will use him to kind of get things done. Say there's a player who is struggling for game time, wants a move, their agent will almost get in touch with Fabrizio Romano and say, oh, look, could you just put out this message?
Could you put this story out there?
To kind of generate conversation around this. You know, there's such power there.
Another really great example recently has been the England job.
Yeah.
So we have Lee Carsley, who didn't get offered the England job. Obviously, that was offered to Thomas Tuchel. But Lee, he'd done quite well with England on the pitch for that first camp. And then it came to the Greece game, and it all seemed to sort of go a little bit wrong. Not just on the pitch, it seemed to go wrong off it as well. And he was giving some very bizarre responses in press conferences. But I think what came out from the press was very much Carsley's not up to this job in terms of the facing the media perspective. Now, as it turns out, Tuchel was offered a contract and signed a contract before that Greece game.
Yeah, so Lee Carsley knew.
So he would have known, you can assume, that he wasn't getting the job and could probably afford to be a bit more experimental or whatever, and probably didn't have to watch his words as carefully in the press conferences.
But that's such a big part of the job now, isn't it?
Yeah.
As England manager, you're not just a coach of the team, you're an ambassador for the country.
There's also been some interesting comments, shall we say, from the likes of the Daily Mail, hasn't there?
Yeah, so they put out an article last week, almost breaking the news. So big story, Tuchel is going to be England manager, but they led with the fact that he is German. They put the words German in capital letters, and a quote from the article here is, "A dark day for English football. A German has been appointed as the English manager."
And again, like, says who? As far as I'm concerned, I think Tuchel's a great manager, and I personally could not care less whether he was German or English or wherever. I just want somebody who's a good man and good at their job and all that sort of stuff. But you're right, these journalists have a lot of responsibility, and we are effectively we're in that sphere as well, Joe.
Because obviously the point of this podcast is we want to be talking about issues within the game from a Christian point of view. Yeah. And I think this is something that we need to be having a voice on.
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking about this, and I think there's two angles here. I think we need to look at this from the viewpoint of the journalist, but I also think we need to look at it from the viewpoint of the manager as well. In that, if you're a journalist, or even if you're not, with social media, we're all journalists now. Yeah. We're not, but
But it's so easy to.
But it's so easy to be like, oh well, I've got the story, I've got the opinion piece. Yeah. So you can use your YouTube channel as a soapbox and all that sort of stuff. So I think that there's a responsibility for us to watch what we say. There's an amazing verse in Colossians, chapter 4, verse 6, that says, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person." And I think that that's really interesting, because the Bible says so much about guarding your tongue and about saying the right things at the right time and not speaking when you don't need to. We've had a journalist on this show before talk about the balance between being critical and being encouraging as a journalist. And I think that it's just more broad. It's expanding out to all of us to watch what we say. And I think actually there's a lesson to be learned here from the point of view of the manager, in terms of taking courage when all things seem to be against them. And again, the Bible says an awful lot about what we should be doing when it feels like people are against us, when people are speaking bad words against us. Now, again, for context, we're not talking about what to say or how to feel when the country's press are criticising your formations. But the Bible talks a lot about how we should take courage and take strength. A verse in 2 Timothy says, "For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline." And I think like that, for me, is almost like the perfect combination for a Premier League manager, to have that strength of knowing, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know my abilities, and confidence in that. Love, which is to treat everyone with grace and with dignity, and speaking self-worth into people, into players, into the other journalists in that press room. And then self-discipline. Guard your tongue as well. But yeah, I would hate to be a football manager.
Oh, awful.
It would just be, you know, the idea sounds great, but you would just have everybody telling you how to do your job.
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine thousands of people, millions of people online telling you that they could do your job better. How would you feel, Ed, if everyone was telling you that you could do your job at UCB better?
I honestly think they probably have a point.
So, Ed, you've had enough time now
to
think about your trivia question. Shall I give it you?
I haven't thought about it at all.
Well, we've been chatting about other things, haven't we?
We have a little bit. Yeah.
Shall I give you the question again?
Yeah, go on. Go again.
Which Premier League player has received the most yellow cards so far this season?
Okay.
I can give you a clue if you want one.
Yeah, go on.
He didn't play this weekend.
Oh, gosh.
Because he was suspended.
Oh, gosh. Well, there you go. So honestly, that's really good because I was going to say Matthias de Ligt.
Okay.
I thought Matthias was a variant of Matthew.
Yeah, it's quite tenuous. I would do it after last week particularly.
It's not double Dan Burn, is it?
Would I double Dan Burn?
You absolutely would. No. Okay, I don't think it's double Dan Burn. Right, I'm gonna have to go for Mark Gahey.
Oh, I thought you had it then. You got the right first name. You got the right book of the Bible, which is good from you. You've got a book of the Bible.
At least. Yeah. Okay.
The answer is Mark Cucurella.
Oh, come on.
5 bookings so far this season.
I was
Didn't play against Liverpool.
I was never getting him.
Oh, well.
Never getting him. So we're still on 4-2, Joe.
Still 4-2.
Oh, goodness.
A stalemate at this point.
Bit of a stalemate, isn't it? I'd be really interested to hear from our listeners to see how they're doing. So please get in touch and let us know how you're doing in the quiz too. That's all we've got time for this week. Thank you so much for listening to The Big Man Up Top. If you want to get in touch with the show, please do send us an email to podcasts@ucb.co.uk. Please follow, subscribe, give us good reviews, all that lovely stuff. This will help us to get the word out. And if you've enjoyed this, tell your mates. Also, a huge thank you to our producer, Anthony Selamat-Webb, for all his hard work behind the scenes. And there will be a new episode next Tuesday.
Up the Potters.
Are you looking forward to it, Joe?
Oh, I'll let you know.
Okay. See you next week.
See you next week.